Hello and welcome to part 11 in my Japanese for Beginners series. By the end of this video, you will be able to say that something is not something in Japanese by using janai or ja-arimasen or any permutation of those words. This lesson corresponds with page 65 of the Genki textbook, but even if you don't have the textbook, that's okay. This video will make perfect sense on its own. では始めましょう。So to understand janai and how it works, let's just look at a basic X wa y des sentence. 私は大学生です。I am a college student is what that means. But what if you're not a college student? I'm not a college student. I graduated a long time ago. So if somebody asks you, let's say, あなたは大学生ですか? Are you a college student? And you're not, and you want to answer and say, I am not a college student. All you have to do is add janai before the des, or you add it after the y or the second noun of the sentence. So, 私は大学生じゃないです. And that becomes, I am not a college student. So note how, kind of like with some other languages, in English, not comes before the thing that it's describing, but in Japanese, it's, I am a college student not. So it lends to a lot of scenarios where you'll have a character saying, I am something not. And it's sort of very 90s. It's like, not. But it's not cheeky like that. It's, it's just the way their sentences are structured, but, it can lend itself to that in dialogue if a character pauses before they add the janai. It's like, I meant the opposite of what I was saying. Ha ha. So, quick note that this does not always work with X, Y des sentence structure where Y is an adjective. You'll find out why in later videos when we start conjugating adjectives, but here's an example of how it does not work. この寿司はおいしいじゃないです. You might think that that's how you would say this sushi is not delicious, but that's not how you conjugate adjectives. It's not how you conjugate that particular kind of adjective. All right, spoilers. Anyway, it's going to be covered in future videos why that doesn't work. But for now, just avoid using an adjective as y in the X, Y des sentence structure. Just use a second noun. So there are a few other ways of saying janai. It's not always janai or janai des. The longest, most polite, most literary way of saying it is dewa arimasen. Dewa is the polite / more literary version of saying ja. And then arimasen is the polite version of the verb nai. These are verbs. So we're sneaking in a little bit of verb conjugation here. Although arimas and arimasen and nai, those are irregular verbs. So this is kind of a bad first introduction to verbs. Anyway, じゃありません、ではありません. So じゃありません, it's basically like the slightly less formal, slightly less, it's less literary. You sound less like a book if you say じゃありません instead of ではありません. And then you can also say ではない, which sounds kind of weird. Unless you're like very like up class or like a teacher maybe or a textbook or something like that or a narrator. ではない, pretty common speech for a narrator, but if you're a regular speaker, stay away from ではない, ではないです. じゃないです, that's pretty common, it's pretty colloquial, but it's also polite because of the des. And then if you don't want to be polite, if you want to be plain about it, just say じゃない. So totally as like a normal speaker, just stick to じゃないです. But like be aware that all those other permutations exist because you'll probably hear them. So now I'm going to show you how if you add a ka to the end of janai des, it turns the sentence into a, isn't it the case that ... So here's an example. This is our first model sentence again. あなたは大学生じゃないですか? So あなたは大学生じゃないです means you are not a college student. But you say あなたは大学生じゃないですか? I'm asking, aren't you a college student? Isn't it the case that you're a college student? So the nuance here, it's more, aren't you a college student? I thought you were. It's not, you're not a college student? I think you're not a college student. It's more, aren't you? I thought you were. that kind of vibe to it. So in this case, with a ka at the end, you actually can use an adjective where y is in the x, y does sentence structure. So I'm going to bring back that forbidden sentence from earlier that I said do not add janai. We're going to do it here. So, 寿司はおいしいじゃないですか? So, 寿司はおいしいじゃないです is not quite grammatically correct. If you use certain intonation, it kind of can be to confuse you further. So forget I just said that. Anyway, yeah. 寿司はおいしいじゃないです. No, don't say that. But 寿司はおいしいじゃないですか? And listen again closely to how my intonation is. 寿司はおいしいじゃないですか? So note I'm going おいしい. I'm stressing the delicious part of the sentence. The ですか part I'm not stressing. If I'm asking a normal question like あなたは大学生ですか? I'd be like あなたは大学生ですか? Like the ka is kind of stressed because I'm asking a question, but 寿司はおいしいじゃないですか? I'm not asking a question really. I'm saying it's more like, but sushi is delicious. Like, isn't sushi delicious though? It has that sort of vibe to it. I'm not really asking a question. I'm kind of like being indignant. Like someone, that would be in response for someone saying like, sushi wa mazui. Like, sushi is gross. And I'm like, sushi wa oishii janai desu ka? It's like, come on, sushi's delicious. And then to hammer this home, and this, for those of you who are anime fans and you watch a lot of like anime starring high school students and stuff, this might sound familiar to you. So if you end a sentence with jan, so this example, 寿司はおいしいじゃん. Jang is kind of the same as じゃないですか, basically, but it's the very colloquial, slangy, teenagery kind of, I mean, you don't have to be a teenager. You can totally be an adult. You can totally be an old person, but it's very slangy, very, very casual. So it's the same sentiment as 寿司はおいしいじゃないですか. 寿司はおいしいじゃん. And again, I'm stressing the おいしい part. Because that's the part that I'm stressing. Like, come on, sushi's delicious. I'm not saying sushi is not delicious. I'm saying, but sushi is delicious. It's kind of like that California, like, yeah, no. It's like, am I saying yeah or am I saying no? So jan is similar to doch. For another example, if you know German, it's kind of like indeed. Sushi is indeed delicious. Or no, sushi is totally delicious. Here's another example, something that's really, really common in colloquial speech. You'll hear it all the time. いいじゃん. Sometimes followed by a 別に. So いいじゃん means, who cares? If you break it down to its parts, い is an adjective that means good. So いいじゃないですか? Like, isn't it the case that it is good? Oh, come on, it's good. Is like literally what it would mean. So that sentiment more cleanly expressed in English is, who cares? Like, whatever. Or to make it slightly closer to the literal translation, I don't see why not. Or sure, why not? So you might say that like, hey, can I borrow your car? Like, いいじゃん. Like, I don't care. いいじゃん, 別に. Whatever. Or is it okay if I wear this sweater on this date? I think it looks kind of dorky. And I say, いいじゃん. It's like, it's okay. Who cares? So here are some model sentences using じゃないです and じゃないですか and じゃん. 私は日本人じゃないです. I am not a Japanese person. 私の犬はバカじゃないです. My dog is not stupid. My dog is not an idiot. 先生は40歳じゃないです. My teacher is not 40 years old. And then tagging on to our last video about particle も、私も40歳じゃないです. I am also not 40 years old. この本は300円じゃないです. This book that I'm holding in my hand, hang on a minute. この本, so I'm holding it in my hands, as you may remember from the Kosoado video. This book that I'm holding in my hands, it's manga technically, but I could still call it a home. この本は300円じゃないです. And that's true, actually. この本は390円. At the time it was printed, it's probably more expensive now because I bought this like in 2000. Anyway, Ayashino series, it's a great series, you should read it. Anyway, この本は300円じゃないです. This book, this manga, or this book is not 300 yen. その本も300円じゃないです. So この本is this book that I'm holding in my hand. その本 would be that book that you are holding in your hand or that you are talking about, related to you, the listener. So I'm using mo, which means also, as you may remember from the previous lesson. So that book in your hand or related to you, the listener, is also not 300 yen. 日本人の高校生は真面目じゃないですか? Like, isn't it the case that, I thought that, Japanese high school students were studious, diligent, serious. So majime is like, it's often translated as serious, but it doesn't really mean serious. It means like, ooh, my hair. It's often translated as serious, but so majime. It's often translated as serious. I catch myself translating it as serious sometimes too when I really shouldn't be. It means a lot of things. It's really nuanced. It's more like studious, diligent, kind of character like Dwight Schrute. You know, he's like, play by the rules, do everything the way you're supposed to. You're not, you know, you can also be a serious person, but it's more like, yeah, like you're diligent, you kind of do what you're supposed to do, you follow the rules. このペンは安いじゃないですか? Isn't this pen that I'm holding in my hand cheap? I thought it was. ステーキはおいしいじゃん. It's like, come on, steak is delicious. You know it. And I just had steak earlier today, like 2 hours ago, and it was delicious. So yeah, ステーキおいしいじゃん. 彼の顔はかっこいいじゃん. Like, come on, he's got a sexy face. So this would be like in response if someone was like, 彼なんてブサイクだよ. Like, he's fugly. And I'll be like, 彼の顔はかっこいいじゃん. Like, but I think his face is sexy. You can't deny that. この動画も面白いじゃん. Come on, this video is also fun and interesting. As in, you know, that video that you're talking about, you know, that was interesting and fun, but come on, this one is also fun and interesting. And it is. So before we review this lesson, if you want to get a little more out of this series, consider supporting it on Patreon. I've got 2 tiers specifically related to this series. So if you support it at the $2 Genki tier or the $19 a month Juku tier, you're basically voting with your dollars to say, hey, Sarah, you should prioritize this Japanese for Beginners series. They come with perks. The $2 level, you get a weekly study guide that teaches you basically, it covers everything I cover in these videos with a little bit of supplemental material. And then the Juku level, that's a lot more hardcore. You get that weekly study guide, but you also get 4 worksheets per week that you fill out as if you were in a class. It's like homework, and then you send them to me and I grade them. Well, I don't give you a letter grade, but I correct any mistakes that you have, give you some notes, and I send them back. So it's kind of like being enrolled in an actual class. So if you want to support the series, either of those levels are available for you. So now on to review. I'm going to say each model sentence and I'm going to leave a few seconds between each sentence. And then I'm going to include timestamps in the video description and also in the pinned comment at the top of the comments section. So basically any phrase that you want to repeat over and over and over again, just click on that timestamp and you can keep going back to that phrase as many times as you want. And it's a good way to study and actually practice saying these phrases or just practice listening to them over and over again. 私は日本人じゃないです。私の犬はバカじゃないです。先生は40歳じゃないです。私も40歳じゃないです。この本は300円じゃないです。その本も300円じゃないです。日本人の高校生は真面目じゃないですか? このペンは安いじゃないですか? ステーキはおいしいじゃん。彼の顔はかっこいいじゃん。この動画も面白いじゃん。Thanks for watching! In the next video in this series, you're going to learn how to end your sentences with particles like ne, or yo, or wa, to give your sentences a little more personality and make you sound less like you're a talking textbook. Thank you again to all of my lovely patrons who support this series and more videos on this channel. Be sure to check out my other playlists. I have an extensive library on this channel of Japanese language learning and translating related videos. And until part 12 of this series, mata ne!